All right, jerk baits, what we're talking about today, they work year round, and not just in the early spring when it's really cold. They actually work throughout the whole year, and for good reason. They imitate bait fish, especially dying bait fish or injured bait fish, which triggers the natural instinct for bass, predator instinct. So how do you get the most out of them? Because man, there's so many out there, right? So let's make it easy for you. I'm gonna break it down in a few simple things. First of all, color choice. There are so many different colors out there, it's ridiculous. And some of these baits have super realistic finishes on them. And of course, they're very expensive too. So which ones do you get? Well, the best way to do this is to break it down into basically three main categories. First of all is the matted finish or the muted finish. And these, the solid type colors here, these work really well in stained water conditions or when it's cloudy, kind of dark. These solid colors work really well. On the other end of the spectrum, when it's sunny out, then something that's more of a chrome, flashy type finish like these, right? Something that's got a lot of reflection to them, work really well in those sunny conditions. And then if you've got clear water, then what I like to do is get something that's a little more translucent, like these. So you can kind of see through them. You can see a little bit of a light through them. And these work great when it's really clear water. So you don't need every color under the sun. You just need like a few in each of those categories. In kind of a bait fish, color, something that resembles the forage in your body of water that you're fishing. You fish in jerkbaits relatively quick, and the bass just have a chance to glance at it, really. So you don't need the exact match color, just something that resembles it close enough, and it'll work for you. Don't worry about it. So don't collect. Don't be a jerkbait collector. So another thing to consider is the size of the bait and the diving depth, right? There's a lot of different ones you can get. So the more popular ones are, like what I just showed you. These that have this size. This is like the 110 size. It's got the deep diving lip on it. That's a pretty popular size, and for good reason. It's like the right size for forage. But you can get in different diving depths. So for example, like the one I just showed you has that big lip. Well, here's the same bait. See the difference? It's got a little lip on it as opposed to the long lip. It's the same bait, same size bait. You see that? But with a shallower lip on it, it dives a lot shallower. So this will go maybe 5-6 feet deep. This goes to more like 10 to 12 foot deep. And so sometimes you just need a bait that gets to the right diving depth. Other times you want a little bit different size. So this bait is a little bit smaller. Yeah. Sometimes the bass, they just want something a little bit different. And a smaller bait, particularly in clear water conditions or when the bite's a little bit off, a smaller size bait works really well. Alternatively, you can go to larger ones too. There's some bigger ones out there. This is a good size one here. They sometimes want a bigger bait. So having a couple of different sizes and different diving depths that they go to, you can cover pretty much the whole water column and their preference for forage size that time of the year. Sometimes in the season, the forage is a little bit bigger than the other times of the rest of the year. And so sizing up or sizing down is the right way to go. Now, one of the things you need to do with jerkbaits is experiment with your retrieve. Now, the standard retrieve is you throw it out there, let it sit for a little bit, and then pop, pop, and let it sit. And pop, pop, and let it sit. And you might wait 3 to 5 seconds between popping it, and that's a pretty productive retrieve. But there's a lot of other ways to retrieve it. Sometimes just pop, 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 pop all the way back to the boat or back to the shoreline can be very, very effective. That darting erratic action, depending on the bait you have, can trigger bites. One of the ways that you can tell how much it moves is just, go along the dock, or if you're in your boat, kind of pop it right alongside and look at it and see how erratic a movement or how much it dives. And it gives you an idea of how hard to pop it. Because sometimes a real subtle pop, a real subtle jerk is what you need. Maybe just with the suspending jerkbait, get it down to the depth it's at and then let it sit and then nudge it. Just give it a little slight nudge, a slight twitch, or maybe a little pop, pop, just subtle, and let it sit again. And if it's a bait that dives really hard, then that soft twitch actually translates to quite a bit of movement on the other end. So you don't need a hard jerk sometimes. Other times, that's what the bass want. They want that thing diving and jerking and going all different directions, really wild or erratic action, and that's what triggers it. So you have to experiment with it. One of the things that some anglers do, instead of pop it, they give a pull with the rod. And just, and then they pause it and they reel up and they give it another pull with a rod, reel up and give it another pull. And then combining it with turns of the reel handle and pulling it. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to start with turning the reel handle to kind of get the bait moving and then pull with the rod and then pause. So it kind of gets a running start and then accelerates. And it almost looks like a bait fish trying to flee or run away from a bass, and then they'll chase it down and trigger it. So it's just some ideas. Don't let that limit your imagination. There's all kinds of ways. Just play around, and sometimes you'll figure out what type of cadence or retrieve they want that day, and it might be something that just the other anglers haven't thought of, and the bass just are craving it. So don't be afraid to experiment with different retrieves. One of the critical components to successful jerkbait fishing is the rod and reel and line that you use. The rod, it should be a medium power, moderate action rod. That's a lot, it's a very limber rod. About 7'1", 7'3" is what you want. That limber rod's gonna do two things for you. First of all, it's a lightweight bait, so it's gonna enable you to cast it out far distance. That rod's gonna load up more, and you're gonna use the power of that rod to throw that lure out there further distances. Second is because it has a lot of give to it and bend, when you do hook a fish, those little treble hooks, they're gonna stay pinned, or that rod's gonna give like a shock absorber. Every time that fish dives and darts and tries to run away from you, that rod's gonna absorb most of that, and it's not gonna pull the hooks out of its mouth. If you had a stronger rod, you run the risk of yanking those hooks out of the fish's mouth. So a limber rod like that works in your favor. Another thing is whether you use bait casting or spinning. Most jerkbait anglers use spinning gear. Again, because it's a lighter lure to throw, but also you're using lighter line, typically 10-pound line, maybe 12-pound line, and it's easier to cast light line like that on spinning reels. And a quality spinning reel is going to enable you to make those long casts. So you don't need to invest a ton on the rod, because most of the times the rods, their action's about the same, but I would invest a little bit more on the reel because you're going to get longer distances with it, plus they have a better drag system. And when you're fishing those little treble hooks, you want a nice smooth drag that's going to give it the right time while you're fighting that fish, so you don't end up ripping those hooks out. The other thing is the line you use. I mentioned 10 to 12-pound line, but you want to use fluorocarbon line. Fluorocarbon sinks, enables that bait to get down there and keep it down there, and it's really super sensitive. The thing about using fluorocarbon line, though, is one brand from another really there's a big difference between, say, each one's being 10-pound line. You need to look at the line diameter. Many of those less expensive budget fluorocarbon lines have a real thick, relatively speaking, a thick diameter compared to the premium lines. And that's going to be a difference between how deep you can get it and also how well you're going to work it and also how far you can cast. The premium lines like Seaguar, most of all of its fluorocarbon lines have a thinner diameter than its competitors. Those, you can get it down deeper, have better sensitivity, they have a higher tensile strength. The high end, like the R18, that's the high end in the Seaguar lineup. You'll notice a difference with that. You can fish 10-pound, even 8-pound with that using jerkbaits, and with fantastic results. So when you're comparing fluorocarbon lines, make sure beyond line strength, you're comparing line diameter, and that's going to help you pick the right one for your budget and your needs. So with those tips and tricks lined up, you're going to catch a lot more fish on jerkbaits this year. For more tips and tricks like this, visit bassresource.com.